Welcome to r/Tales from Your Server. It is the place where waiters share awesome stories about their guests. For today, we have 3 good stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and here we go. The first story is, Manager makes waitress apologize to Karen, who hit her and then fires her. No, seriously. This is a follow-up to the Karen power couple incident from last week, but there was some amusement last time. This one just makes me effing furious. Furious enough to make me, a bartender, walk out of a shift on a Saturday night. Last week, while my manager was out sick and I was the acting manager, we had an incident where a couple of 60-somethings came in, ordered 1 beer, complained it was flat. It was not flat. Repeatedly insulted the young woman who brought it to them, and after I was involved, the old woman slapped her hand when she tried to take it back. I kicked them both out. Well, last night they came back. They immediately asked to see my manager to complain about last week, and she showed up. They told her their waitress was stupid, rude, and incompetent, and tried to take back something they'd ordered without permission, and that she'd kicked them out. My manager called her over, made her apologize to them without even asking her side of the story, then pulled her into her office. She finally asked her side of the story, then called her a liar repeatedly, and fired her. Let me repeat that. This 19-year-old girl, this literal teenager, was forced to apologize to an old woman that struck her and was then fired for it. I didn't know exactly what was going on until I heard all the shouting and saw her leaving the office crying. When I went to follow her, I saw the old couple, and I already knew what had happened. I went into my manager's office and let her effing have it. I walked into her office and slammed the door. I had her attention. "Did you just fire Redacted?" I asked in a quiet but clearly furious tone. She said yes. "Why the F did you just fire Redacted? What did those two just tell you?" She stammered a bit and answered. "They told me she brought them a flat beer, was rude to them and tried to take it back without asking, and kicked them out. Then she told me this ridiculous story about them insulting and hitting her. She then turned back to her computer, and I, just about at the top of my lungs, informed her that that story was true. I was there, at the table when it happened." She flinches and looks over at me and says, "You don't have to shout at me." I move forward with, "Why didn't you talk to me first?" And she responds, "Well, nobody mentioned you." "Why? What did you do?" I'll spare you the recap of last time. There's a thread up about it already, entitled "Karen Power Couple Wants to Speak to the Manager," which is me. Hooray, if you want to hear it again. She looks at me with disgust. "Excuse me, I know the last names from church. They're a nice couple, and they wouldn't do something like that, especially not Karen hitting a server." Now is a good time to mention this little place doesn't have a camera, so it really is my word and the already fired young ladies against 2 senior citizens my manager knows from church. Suffice to say, we're effed as far as her believing us goes, but I was too peeved off to care about that. Well, clearly you don't know them that well, because she did. I was right there at the table when it happened, and I will not be in the same building as them, so either they're leaving or I'm leaving. This may seem like a risky move on my part, and it is, but keep in mind I'm our only bartender, and this was around 10 p.m. on a Saturday. Plus, I'm the only supervisor outside the kitchen, and one who does most of her job as manager. She can't replace me. She'll be losing revenue and have to work a lot harder than she's used to. And what does she do? She tells me to get out of her office. Well, fine, I can do that. I get out of her office and out of the restaurant. On my way out, I find a waiter who's taking their order, pull him aside and let him know what's going on. He tells me he'll spread the word to the other servers and kitchen staff of what this old couple did and not to serve them. I don't know how well that did or didn't work. I find the young girl still sitting outside crying. She doesn't have a car, so she had to call her dad and he's not here yet. I sit down next to her, let her know I just walked out over this, and ask to hear her side of what just happened. She tells me everything that happened before I got involved, and that her dad's not going to believe her. I decide to wait with her to talk to her father. I figure her supervisor backing her up should help her case, and I hope it did, but I'm not sure. He was kinda hostile and didn't stick around long. Then I leave. I got an angry phone call from my manager on my way home about walking out. I remind her it's exactly what I told her I was going to do and hang up. Another half an hour later, she calls me back and says she'll rehire the server if I come back. I agree and go right back at my own expense. Now, I don't know if she's actually called her back or offered to rehire her, or if there'll still be some disciplinary action for her. It's still too early to tell. But my manager insisted when it was brought up that the young lady had already agreed to come back and thanked her for it, and the only reason she wouldn't be is if my manager lied to my face. She's never done that before, but I'm not going to dismiss the possibility in this case. I do know I'm going to be in for it when my manager's husband, the owner, finds out about this. He's probably not going to fire me. We're already short-staffed on bartenders, and I work the most hours out of the ones we have, but he's going to do something. It might be time to start looking for a new job. There will probably be an update to the story after I go back to work on Tuesday. Edit. She is back and working again. She seems really nervous now, which also makes sense because she's now under more scrutiny. I talked to the owner. As near as I can tell, there's not going to be any serious consequences for anybody. He does believe the old couple that the server was doing a poor job and being rude, but he also doesn't think it's worth firing the girl over. He also believes the old woman did strike her on the hand. I guess at least he's a better judge of character than his wife, and while they aren't banned, he does agree with me kicking them out. He was far more peeved at me for shouting at his wife, and told me he'd be firing me if that ever happened again, and while I don't believe that, the message has been received. This wasn't the ideal way for this to go. The owner's peeved at me, the old couple can still come back, and our young server still has reason to be worried. But he's not going to actually do anything about, well, anything that happened. At all. The second story is, this is the story of the worst coworker to ever exist. Hey everyone! For anyone who had a rough night dealing with the church crowd last night, or just needs a good story in general, I'd like to tell you all the story of the worst coworker ever. Disclaimer: some details may reveal where I work. If you notice them, please don't say anything. Also on mobile. About 1 year ago, right around the holidays, this girl, let's call her Debbie, got hired at my restaurant. Now Debbie had just turned 18 a week ago, and was very excited for her first job. Debbie still lived at home and didn't pay bills. This is important later. Let me start out by saying that Debbie was not nice. Debbie got 3 people fired in the 6 months she worked with us by calling corporate and making complaints, like her life depended on it. Debbie liked to be right. If you said something to Debbie that Debbie did not agree with, then she would go to the manager immediately. If the manager did not agree, Debbie would call corporate for creating a hostile work environment and discrimination. As you can imagine, this made Debbie not fun to work with. Debbie also had a bit of a complex. For someone who had just started her first job, she acted like she had invented the idea of restaurants. Debbie would speak to guests like a manager and would go to other servers' tables if they had a problem and pretend to be a manager. Debbie liked to get on the grill to help and tell the grill line how to do their job. Debbie would also try to help host if it got busy, and this would result in double and triple seating because she didn't know how to work the POS system. If customers ever complained on Debbie, she would immediately burst into tears. After about 3 months, Debbie found out she was sick. She had a tumor on her brain that she would need removed. If the surgery went okay, she'd be out of work for a month. Now, as we all know, this surgery seems very expensive. My company offers a program to help employees in need who've had emergencies or will have to be put off work for a while. A certain amount is taken out of every paycheck and put towards a charity fund. If someone should have an emergency, they can apply to be gifted by the fund for help. So every single server, cook, host, dishwasher, and manager donates to this fund every single week. Debbie applies for the fund. She gets rewarded a few thousand to help pay for the surgery expenses. You'd think this would be good enough for Debbie, but it wasn't. Debbie gets mad that the fund didn't give her more. December was a bad month for my store. A single mom of 2 had her house burned down. She applied for the fund and was happy with what she got. Another coworker had her daughter killed in a hit-and-run accident. She was happy with what the fund gave her. Neither one of them complained and thanked all of us for our contributions to the charity. Debbie decides that the money rewarded to her wasn't enough and gets on our store Facebook page and posts her GoFundMe account. Debbie explains in her post that she needs a few more $1,000s because she'll be out of work for the month and needs help paying her bills. As previously stated, Debbie still lived at home. When someone asked Debbie what bills she had, she said she needs money for her phone bill. Debbie never said thank you for the money she got from the charity. Instead, Debbie gets mad that we don't donate to her GoFundMe and posts on her personal Facebook that we're a bunch of greedy dumb bees. After her surgery and recovery, Debbie comes back full force and ready for revenge. Calls to corporate increase, shifts get worse, people start calling out on days she has to work, and then the fateful night comes. Debbie slips on a menu. Debbie sues the company for money because she states that it causes trauma to her recent injury. The company reviews the camera and sees that it was Debbie herself who had dropped the menu. Debbie quit out of shame 2 weeks later, and thus ends the tale of the worst coworker to ever exist. And the last story is, guests who didn't tip on their large bill immediately suffered karma's wrath. So this happened a few weeks ago. Table of 8 comes in. Cool, takes up my largest table. Double cool. I love when the tables are filled up. They all order wine, with a glass of ice water, several appetizers, our largest steaks with upgrades, aka upsells for the service staff. All end up with a cup of coffee to finish it off with dessert. Everyone was satisfied. Everyone was nice, if not a bit short, but that's totally fine. No complaints for the entire 2.5 hours they were there. I'm approached by a gentleman who says he will cover the entire bill. Triple cool. As I'm making my rounds checking in with my other tables, I hear this same gentleman make the comment that he will not be leaving a tip because he doesn't believe in tipping. So I made it a point to, when I drop off the check, say, "Okay guys, here's the bill. Thank you all for being such pleasant guests. Y'all are a beautiful family. Would we like to split the check this evening, or will one person be picking it up?" A different guest made a gesture, and I was just thinking, thank God anybody but that other SH bag. So I handed him the ticket, and he slid the card in my hand. I run the check, bring it to the table, and tell them all to have a fabulous night. By now, I should mention that SH Bag has had a few drinks under his belt, and he is being loud, boisterous, and overall irritating to even look at. So anyways, I run the card and bring the bill, and Dumb A is saying really loudly, "You don't leave her a tip. She's given auto gratuity. Servers are uneducated and already paid $15 an hour as it is. They don't need your hard-earned cash. Let her work for it." Then gestures to his D. I should add that everyone at this point appears irritated with this unwanted guest. The gentleman that paid for dinner gestures to me, and I come over to the table, ready as heck to answer any questions. He pulls me closer to whisper in my ear the following. I really cannot stand this guy. He's been degrading and sociopathic the entire dinner. However, I really enjoyed your service. Nothing would make me tip you more than to watch you call the cops and have him arrested for public intoxication. He's my brother-in-law and has been entitled, selfish, and ignorant his entire life. I'll tip you the same anyways, but I would love to see this happen. Also, he drove himself here. His wife left him a while ago for his hideous behavior, and I know for a fact he will be on the road driving himself around after he leaves here. As this is unfolding, I see his wife, aka the perpetrator's sister, nodding along and looking angry about her brother. So certainly I made management aware, and we called the cops. They already had heard my spite against this guy the entire dinner service, and were aware of his behavior. So one of my managers called the cops. They were made aware of the situation, and stopped him on his way out the door, and I literally stood there and watched them cuff this guy and say, "You seriously need to learn how to behave in public. This isn't our first rodeo with you." I ended up getting a $400 tip on a $1,200 check, just for getting some sack of SH arrested. You bet your A I'll get you arrested if you disrespect me. Thanks for watching. Bye.